Halloween Ends 2022 Movie Review. Answers to possible questions. The biggest and most anticipated fall slasher movie has been released this year, and in this article, I will be reviewing Halloween Ends 2022. The Halloween franchise is a series of horror films in the American slasher style that consists of 13 films. The story of these films is about a famous masked killer named Michael Myers, who had a severe mental disorder as a child, kills his sister Judith on a Halloween night and is imprisoned in a mental institution. Michael, using a knife, killed his sister and turned that knife into one of the deadly weapons in horror movies that he uses a lot. The first Halloween movie was made by John Carpenter in 1978 and is considered one of the most prominent slasher films in history. The movie Halloween Ends, made by David Gordon Green, is the end of 35 appearances of Michael's character in slasher movies. At first, this director planned this ending as a trilogy and was able to successfully complete it. He made the first film in 2018, Halloween Kills, in 2019, and was supposed to release the final version in 2021, which was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Green finally screened the final part of this film and ended an epic story. The movie Halloween Ends was released on October 14th this year and managed to sell $60 million. It also received grades on different websites, which got 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, 5.8 on IMDb, and an average score of 44 on Meta, which publishes scores based on critics. Narrative analysis. In this film, the story of Laurie Strode's life is told, which after her last encounter with Michael Myers, she tries to forget it. Myers has not been seen since the last time she had a fight with him, and Laurie finally decides to let go of her anger and fear and move on with her life. However, when a young man is accused of murdering a boy he babysat, a wave of violence and terror ensues, forcing Laurie to confront a demon she can't control. The director of this film, Mr. Green, tries to end his popular series in the slasher style, starting with a relatively weak reaction to his previous version and starting with a more dramatic story. He takes a romantic and emotional story and tries to play more with emotions than to deal more with the element of fear. In fact, the story that was told was not scary at all, which is why it received many negative reviews. In the beginning and during the length of the story, we saw a few scary sequences that were stained with the emotional story of the film, which did not allow the viewer to embrace that sense of fear and go with it. The main focus of the film is more on Laurie, her grandson, and Corey, and Michael plays a small role in the story. At the end of the story, we meet Michael more, which makes the end of the film much better than the beginning. The director and writer wanted something different in their last act to end the series and were able to successfully complete this operation and finally defeat this killer after 35 years of reign. They tried to show a new angle to discover the legacy of this killer, which according to some fans, they couldn't do it well and made his failure look easy. The fact that Michael was shown as an old and worn-out character who shares his duty with another human being and in the end fails in that simple way does not remind the fans of his legacy in any way and simply shows us the end of a character. If he didn't die at Laurie's hand, Sad would have died himself. The plot of this character, like other popular characters like Freddy Krueger, was twisted and not well woven together. The setup that Laurie, Corey, and the supporting characters added to the story was fascinating and created a work that is fascinating on its own, but an ending for a legendary killer, even in this way, cannot be acceptable. Corey's decisions, that too suddenly, were a bit strange, which had a bad effect on the story, but could still convince the audience. The emotional complexities that happened to a person going mad and succeeded was a strange contradiction for Corey's character, which the story failed to explain to the viewer, and in this sense it also met with a brief failure. Structural analysis. The overall structure of the film was strangely acceptable, and at the beginning, it was considered to be its atmosphere, which depicted the fall well for us and did not make something out of Halloween, where all the people scare each other and only different parties are held. The atmosphere created by the director was such that you never feel that a sequence is too dark, and you can clearly understand and observe each sequence with your own eyes. The third part of creating the atmosphere and suspense of this film was the quality of the sound and music of the film at the time, which was determined by the sequence. The music could communicate well with every shot and every impression, reaching a point where it even leaves room for silent sequences. The characterizations are also pretty well explained, and the introduction of a new character who rarely loses his mind and becomes a killer is well done. But the most interesting thing that happened to this ending is the return of Jamie Lee Curtis as a hero who wants to change the fate of the city. And for the old audience of the franchise, it is a well-chosen sense of reunion. Jamie Lee Curtis can gradually shed the layers of his past and become the hero he wants to be. He has become more vulnerable due to having a grandson that he worries about, and with the past that he faces, it can be noted that his mental structure is well formed. The director also shows the amount of vulnerability to the audience by showing images of people from the past who all blame him. The script is terribly close to Laurie and her grandson from melodrama, and at the same time, Michael is almost lost in the story, and this can be seen as the weakness of the writer who made the film in 110 minutes, why he kept Michael in the corner of the ring. The director and the filmmaker did not have any ideas for suspense in terms of filming, coloring, and delusioning effects, and they simply left everything to the story to scare the audience, which they did not succeed. Apart from the final sequence and that exciting fight, other events were also recognizable and showed that the breathtaking moments are no longer useful for the director, and he cannot add the element of fear and apprehension. Michael's killings were not creatively expressed and failed to satisfy the viewer. Michael's signature, which is his kitchen knife, was one of the most attractive classic elements of the series, which the director preserved well. Finally, the end of Halloween may not be a strong film, but overall, it is a work of the end of a work that presents after 35 years. A sad ending of a negative legend of a city, combined with an emotional premise. Michael's mask was one of the most interesting things that was shown in this movie. His mask had been transformed in such a way that almost the left half of it was burnt, and almost like Michael himself, he no longer had any power. And the combination of this character, along with his mask, showed an interesting weakness. Why was Michael's story not explained at the end of the movie? After the release of the first Halloween movie, the villain of this movie, Michael Myers, had an identity that no one knew, which made it even scarier. All the audiences who have watched this beautiful franchise over the years have been waiting for an original identity of this character to at least see him completely after his mask is removed. But after Michael's mask is completely removed, we see a strange, blurred face that doesn't even make out. Mr. Gordon Green, the director of this film, gave explanations to convince the viewer. He says that it's always the unknown identities and generally the elements that remain a mystery at the end that are scarier, and the fact that there was no face from Michael, I think, helped make the film even scarier. I don't want people to focus on the character itself. I want the main focus of the story to be on the effect that killer has on other people's lives. I don't want to get into this character's personal life, and I don't want to know his forbidden motivation. Otherwise, he was a talking character from the beginning. Since his mask was removed, there were many theories that were nothing more than hypotheses, and all of them were violated by the director. And at the end of the story, it is the same narrative of the book and comic book that is left for the fans. There is no doubt that the director had a purpose in removing her mask and not showing it in its full form, other than to attract more attention. But it was a very nice move to leave the film with a faithful state of secrecy. The technique of determining the target, the happiness of the talking killer seemed attractive, but Michael, who had not fertilized since the beginning of the residence and his secret remained hidden, has many explanations hindered his frightening effect. Ending a franchise can be challenging, and having a director establish the background of a well-known villain in a film can run the risk of devising and upsetting many horror fans, which Green did well to avoid. Does Michael's story end during the final fight at the end of Halloween? Laurie Strode manages to overpower Michael and stab him several times before he dies in his kitchen. However, this was not enough for Laurie, and he ends up taking Michael Myers' body to the Haddonfield landfill, where he throws her body into the crusher, and the footage shows her body being badly mangled by the machine and nearly destroyed. Although Michael Myers has died and returned before, hinting at immortality, the 2018 reboot resets every sequel except for the 1978 original Halloween, meaning this is Michael's first death in this timeline, and the possibility of his return to the intensity is low. Green's reboot trilogy didn't have any special supernatural elements, which means that Michael Myers will be remembered forever and there is no coming back, according to the most likely theories. Although there is a possibility that there will be another look-alike killer like Corey, it will no longer be Michael and his story will be completed. Why did Michael Myers live in the sewers? Halloween Ends reveals that Michael Myers has been living in the sewers of Haddonfield for the past 4 years, but never explains why he chooses that particular place to stay. After the events of Halloween Kills, the Myers house is destroyed, but Michael goes into hiding instead of fleeing the city. Michael never stops killing Laurie, which means he wants to stay at Haddonfield for as long as he can, killing every once in a while as a way to satisfy himself. However, due to his highly publicized crimes, he is forced to live in an open sewer under a bridge to avoid being found. Michael's ultimate plan is never revealed, but given that he uses Corey's murders as an excuse to go after Laurie, it's safe to assume that he'll be motivated for revenge. And what better place than a sewer to instill fear in Corey and the audience? Did Michael Myers make Corey a killer, or was it from scratch? The film follows the evolution of a newly introduced killer named Corey Cunningham and shows how he goes from being an ordinary man to a serial killer. While some characters in the film theorize that there may be a supernatural element to Corey's crimes, Laurie also says that he has eyes similar to Michael's, so Corey most likely developed his violent personality on his own. Like most real serial killers, Corey's first murder is an accident. At the beginning of the film, he murders a child while he is actually babysitting him, and after he is released from prison, the town of Haddonfield drives Corey deeper and deeper into darkness by playing the themes of the Halloween carnage. Various citizens tease him and call him a child killer, and this is the element that makes him an aggressive killer. Although his crimes are inexcusable, it cannot be said that Michael Myers made Corey a murderer. Michael only used him to get close to Laurie, and in his final scenes, Corey took revenge for Michael's abuse by stealing his mask. Where do Allison go at the end of the story? However, Allison eventually discovers the truth, and the film ends with her deciding to leave Haddonfield. Laurie tries to warn Allison about Corey, but Allison doesn't believe her, causing a rift in their relationship. However, Allison eventually discovers the truth, and the film ends with her deciding to leave Haddonfield. He is last seen driving past a sign marking Haddonfield town limits, but it is never mentioned where he is going.